was just a few weeks ago that the ACLU took the state of Tennessee to federal court and lost horribly. The ACLU tried to get the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeal to strike down a law that banned child genital mutilation. Specifically, the ACLU argued that there's a constitutional right for parents to sterilize and castrate their own children. And this backfired spectacularly for the ACLU, as we discussed on this show at the time. And as today, mutilating children in the name of gender-affirming care remains illegal in Tennessee. So they failed. And these procedures have been halted. Now, given that recent history, you might think that the ACLU would think twice before it filed yet another agenda-driven lawsuit against Tennessee. You'd assume that, at the very least, they'd ensure that they had an airtight case to make sure that that everything's fine before they ever step foot in another courthouse in the state. That's what they would do if they were a serious civil liberties organization that took the law seriously. But the ACLU isn't a serious civil liberties organization, and it hasn't been one for some time. Now it resembles a cult. And like so many other so-called liberal institutions that people used to take seriously, it is basically a left-wing cult. And if there's one thing we know about cultists, it's that they don't have any shame whatsoever. They're not deterred by failure or humiliation. They just press on at all costs to promote their ideology, come what may. So this week, predictably enough, the ACLU boldly announced that it's once again suing the state of Tennessee. And this time, they're not seeking to castrate children. Instead, they're fighting for the right of HIV-infected prostitutes to knowingly spread their infection to their clients. Yes, really. That's why they want a court to strike down Tennessee's statute on aggravated prostitution. Now, I'll get to the ACLU's arguments for this in a moment, but just to be crystal clear about what the ACLU is objecting to here, I want to read the Tennessee statute on aggravated prostitution. This is what they don't like. This is what they're suing against. Here it is, quote, "A person commits aggravated prostitution when, knowing that such person is infected with HIV, the person engages in sexual activity as a business or as an intimate or as an inmate in a house of prostitution or loiters in a public place for the purpose of being hired to engage in sexual activity. Aggravated prostitution is a Class C felony." Now, unless you're a prostitute who wants to knowingly infect other people with HIV, it's hard to see what conceivable problem you could have with a law like that. Prostitution is already illegal in Tennessee for obvious reasons. And all this law does is attach extra penalties if you engage in prostitution when you know that you have a deadly, highly transmissible disease that causes a progressive failure of the human immune system. So that seems pretty reasonable, right? But for more than a year, activists in Tennessee have been campaigning against this law. In the interest of full disclosure, and because it's honestly pretty amusing, here are their arguments. This is a professor from the University of Memphis named Robin Lennon Deering. And here's what she says. Watch.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your research and the main takeaways?
Yes. The biggest thing that people don't understand is that the HIV criminal laws do not require people to actually transmit HIV. At least that's the way it is here in Tennessee. In fact, they don't even have to have physical contact. For example, we have two laws. One of them is aggravated prostitution. And with this particular felony law, all they have to do is get into an undercover police officer's car or agree to talk to someone who is an undercover police officer, and they are arrested. So number one, it doesn't mean that you've transmitted HIV. And number two, the people that are arrested are usually financially insecure, perhaps homeless, living on the street. They have no money to fight the charges.
Okay, so the first argument you just heard is that people can be arrested for aggravated prostitution even if they don't actually succeed in transmitting HIV. This is a tremendous injustice, according to this professor at the University of Memphis. Notice how she describes her hypothetical scenario. You know, she says all you need to do is get into an undercover police officer's car, and if you happen to, quote, agree to talk to someone who's an undercover police officer, then the cops will book you for aggravated prostitution. Now, in case you haven't guessed, she's leaving something out here, which is that the law requires that you knowingly have HIV when you get into that undercover car, and then knowingly offer sex to that undercover police officer. So, yes, you don't actually have to successfully transmit HIV, but if you try to, then that's still a crime. Which means that it's pretty much like any other felony. Like, if you successfully commit a felony, then that's a crime. If you try to, in most cases, but you fail, that's still a crime. If you try to kill someone, even if you don't succeed in killing them, it is still a crime. And I think for most people, that's not hard to grasp. And all of this, these seem like important details, but the professor with 2 last names and pink glasses somehow forgot to mention them. By the way, this professor, Robin Lennon Deering, bills herself as a social work educator who uses, quote, an anti-oppressive practice framework and intersectional perspective to increase awareness of social injustices. So if you send your child to the University of Memphis, that's what you're paying for. In fact, if you pay taxes in the state of Tennessee, that's what you're paying for because it's a public institution. But let's get back to this professor's other argument. She also says that many people arrested under this prostitution law happen to be financially insecure. They're often homeless and, quote, have no money to fight the charges. Of course, this isn't an argument at all. It makes absolutely no sense to legalize immoral and dangerous behavior because most people engaging in this immoral and dangerous behavior also happen to be poor. I mean, if that's the standard, then we can't be too far from legalizing murder because the vast majority of people who commit murder aren't exactly rich. It'd be one thing if, it were just one lefty faculty member at the University of Memphis who talked like this, but this is now a common view on the left. In fact, the reasoning gets even worse. When it announced the lawsuit against Tennessee over this aggravated prostitution law, the ACLU made this argument, quote, breaking, we're suing Tennessee for their aggravated prostitution statute that targets people with HIV with harsh punishment and lifetime sex offender registration. This law is unconstitutional and disproportionately affects Black and transgender women. Now, I'll read the rest of their statement in a second, but let's pause for just a moment. They're saying that the law targets people with HIV. Just like that professor, they're ignoring the fact that the law only applies to prostitutes with HIV who know they have the virus. Okay, so unless we're saying that everybody with HIV is a hooker, then it does not target people with HIV. It targets prostitutes who have a deadly virus who are knowingly attempting to spread it. The October 15th tax deadline has just passed. I know many of you might be dreading the stress of filing your taxes. Filing your taxes can be a long, excruciating process, but if you fail to file, you'll start to pile penalties on your tax debt. And that's why you need to check out Tax Network USA. The team at Tax Network USA has a track record of success. They have reduced tax debt for numerous clients totaling over $1 billion. Whether you're looking at a $10,000 or a $1 million tax debt, they can help you with a settlement. It doesn't matter if you haven't filed in 1 year, 5 years, even a whole decade. Tax Network USA is equipped to secure the best settlement for you. The expert attorneys and tax professionals at Tax Network USA can help resolve all tax cases no matter how they started. Don't let tax debt control your life any longer. Take the first step toward resolving your tax issues by visiting taxnetworkusa.com/Walsh. That's taxnetworkusa.com/Walsh today. But ACLU, they're not the only ones playing this game. Here's a statement on this law from the executive director of Out Memphis, a woman named Molly Quinn. Quote, this statute solely targets people because of their HIV status and keeps them in cycles of poverty while posing absolutely zero benefit to public health and safety. Yeah, preventing the spread of HIV has zero benefit to public health. This is how pretty much every institution on the left argues now. They don't just lie, they also omit every relevant detail to push their agenda. The other part about that statement from the ACLU is revealing in ways that the ACLU probably didn't intend. They say the law disproportionately affects Black and transgender women, meaning men. Now, 2 things about that. First of all, it's fine for a law to disproportionately affect certain groups as long as that's not the purpose of the law, right? If you're passing a law with the intent of, oppressing a certain racial group, well, that's not good. That's you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. But if the law applies to everyone, then its disproportionate impact is irrelevant. Again, laws against murder, you would argue, disproportionately affect Black communities. Because violent crime is more common in the Black community. It doesn't make the law unconstitutional. In fact, here's the thing. Laws against any crime will disproportionately impact those who want to do that crime. That's the way laws work. Laws against stealing disproportionately impact those who want to steal. That's the way it goes. But the really interesting thing about the ACLU statement is that they're claiming that, by and large, Black men are the demographic group that's knowingly spreading HIV within their communities. They're not saying the police are enforcing this law in some racist way. They're not claiming that the cops are fabricating evidence or anything like that. They're saying that black men are the ones who are doing this. And they're supposed to be the anti-racist side, I suppose. Now, here's what the ACLU says Tennessee should do instead of this. Here's what they say. Instead of criminalizing HIV, which disproportionately targets people who are already socially and financially marginalized, lawmakers should invest in evidence-based public health support for people with HIV. Tennessee, we'll see you in court. Again, there's the arrogance from an organization that just lost badly to Tennessee in court. First, they tell voters in Tennessee that they can't ban child castration. Now they're telling voters that they don't have a right to punish prostitutes for knowingly transmitting HIV in their state. Instead, they're saying Tennessee should adopt evidence-based public health support, which is doublespeak that means precisely nothing. I mean, to the extent that you can divine any meaning from those words, it actually sounds a lot like what Tennessee is already doing. Jailing people who knowingly spread HIV is evidence-based public health support. It's maybe the most logical, most evidence-based method imaginable when it comes to dealing with this problem. What the ACLU is really saying is something that the left hates to admit outright, but it's also something they believe very strongly. And this is what it all comes down to. And we've seen this kind of thing in states, not just in Tennessee, where whether it's prostitutes or anybody else, they're trying to decriminalize the knowing, intentional spread of HIV. And in all those cases, what that is really rooted in is the left's belief that the highest good is to follow your sexual impulses all the time, everywhere, with no limitations. They value unbridled, irresponsible sex, whatever the consequences might be. If you conceive a child in the process, then just kill the child, they say. If you get HIV, no big deal. If you spread HIV, no big deal. Just keep on having sex and spreading HIV so that everyone else can join in the fun. I mean, this is hedonism. It's what the left values far more than the so-called minority communities that they claim to care so much about. They would rather encourage prostitution and contribute to the spread of HIV in these communities than actually do something to help them. And without any kind of higher guiding purpose or belief in any higher power, leftists are fixated entirely on raw sensory pleasure. They're as prideful and self-assured as everyone else who settled on that purpose in life throughout all of human history. They're not unique or special. That's why, like the hedonists of the past, soon enough, they'll be defeated, dead, and forgotten. And that is why the ACLU and its many left-wing supporters who desperately want black men with HIV to prostitute themselves and spread HIV are today canceled. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.